HubSpot presents the Modern Sales Leader Award, a way to celebrate individuals who move the industry forward through purposeful, data-driven decision-making and a commitment to prioritizing people. Nominations are open. Visit modernsalesleader.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey folks, welcome to this episode of the Science of Scaling podcast. My name is Mark Roberge, your host. Today we've got a gem. We've got Dino DiMartino, the CRO at Snyk. It's surprising to people who pursue PLG plays, product-led growth plays, that layering a sales organization, a go-to-market organization onto it is a critical to success. I can't think of a single PLG unicorn that never had to do that. And Dino has deep experience in it. He's going to drop knowledge on that process, how it's different from sales-led growth, how you hire, pay, run the methodology, align the organizations differently so you get it right. Let's go on to the episode. Welcome to the show, Dino.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so Snyk's been an amazing ride and we want to unpack that. It's a pleasure to kind of get into your head on layering go-to-market on top of this PLG funnel. However, before we even do that, how do you even define PLG? You know, like it's like we used to call it freemium, and you got free trials, you got like, there's a lot of different aspects to it. Like how do you think about that? And how did you define that at Snyk, which is probably a pretty important foundation as you came in?
Yeah, I think that's a very good first step for any founder or organization to think through is before you start using the three-letter acronym, what does it mean to you? And there's a ton of research that founders and go-to-market leaders can do to get their definition relative to the product they're launching. But for us, freemium is certainly one derivative of PLG, right? But a lot of our PLG has been focused on capturing the mind share of application security professionals and developers with our freemium product, and then trying to provide an experience that allows them to, at some level of small to medium scale, acquire the technology. That's certainly part of our PLG definition. Other parts of it, though, that we're exploring, live around the indirect benefit of having your technology out in the wild, both for what I'll call personal use cases. So there's a lot of folks in the development community that code on their own. They want to sort of experiment with different technologies. So they're using Snyk more PLG friendly. And I think as you go to maybe software or the financial services side of the house and the like, there hasn't maybe been the exploration or determination as to how easy or hard PLG will be. But certainly the likes of Atlassian, Datadog, GitHub, GitLab, they've all proven that there's a lot of selling that can be done with the product. But I do think that you can only take it so far from a scale standpoint, and you can only unlock so much of your TAM without bringing sort of a more formed sales and marketing strategy around it. But I'm certainly very pro PLG from my experiences at Snyk.
Hey folks, just Mark here. I want to point this out. Dino said something along the lines of like, explore it, PLG. And it's really important to think about this. I mean, right now we're trying to figure out, is PLG applicable to our category? How do we determine that? When in doubt, do it for two reasons. Number one, if you don't and you scale to 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, it's so hard to go back to it. It's so hard to be sales-led growth and then go back to PLG. That's why PLG is exciting, is because it's such a disruptive model. It's really hard to be selling something for like 10, 20, 30,000 a year and then start selling it for 50, and start it as free and carve out enough value to be free. So, it's kind of a one-shot thing. And if you're not sure, try it. The other piece is if you're wrong, which I've had to do with some of our investments, then it's like, okay, let's switch to sales-led. And guess what? You're left with a really easy to adopt product and a pretty big demand gen funnel. So it's like, when in doubt, give it a shot. All right, let's get back to Dino. And we have to talk about layering the sales org in, which is quite a science and critical to not ruin the magic, but bring in this new function, which even just to start, like when I'd speak to first-time founders who are pursuing PLG, they almost think that if they have to add sales, they failed, right? They're like, if I have to add sales,
we're like this crutch
right?
now.
Like I'm not good at product, and yet you and I were chatting, and we're like, dude, can you think of any PLG unicorn that didn't eventually put sales in.
Yeah.
So this isn't a failure. I don't know. Can you explain that to the product founder? Like, why is it necessary as a synergy to create the true company?
So I think it's really explaining that the concentric circles of your TAM just open up if you have the right go-to-market and marketing. I mean, those two have to be in lock and step. It's not one or the other. Leaders and people, which I got the pleasure of joining and inheriting on my team and within the marketing team, people that really understood it. They were educating me on PLG, and us brainstorming on ways to sort of unlock it as we went forward. But admittedly, when I joined, I think there was already an absolute understanding within Snyk that go-to-market was, maybe 49% of the product experience if the product itself was 51. And in many cases, I think there are deals we win explicitly due to the people that are in front of our customers. So when you move into the enterprise, I think the founders will start to see that there is this huge element that relationships, doing what you say you're going to do, having people that can guide you on the more sophisticated use cases along the way are really important to unlocking the product value. I think some of the folks in our marketing organization did a great job of educating me on the indirect and direct sort of benefits of PLG. So the direct benefit is, what all the venture capitalists want to hear, which is fair. They want efficiency, rapid time to scale, great product telemetry. So there was a reaffirmation of these, I'll call it principles of PLG, that they absolutely retaught me or educated me further. I think it was the indirect elements of it, like all the benefits that we got as we looked at our demand funnel, which even to this day, I think every company struggles with. How do I actually attribute value to a freemium user that's using Snyk at home for their own sort of personal use case, that then is a developer at Bank of America or an AppSec person at Bank of America, and they all of a sudden buy Snyk. So I think we are struggling in how can we sort of correlate that information, but we see it at scale, and it's anecdotally, but when we talk to customers, our prospects that I've been involved with many of our enterprise sales reps and leaders, that there has been an absolute benefit by this halo effect that the marketing team was educating me on.
Hey folks, just Mark here. This indirect value that Dino's talking about, I think is really important. We don't think about it that much. In a way, the marketing team is saying like, there's some intangibles here. Like fine, like some person downloaded our product and started working with it in a garage project. They just so happened to be a senior technical developer at Bank of America, and that leads us into that account. Like, how do we measure that? I gotta say that as like brand. You know what I mean? Like, how do you measure the value of having that billboard there, running the commercials for a month? Like, it's just hard to do. And it's just that brand that's being built up. And the reason why that's important is in our world of software and tech, it's hard to develop sustainable moats. It's hard to develop moats that are not easy for the competition to copy. And that's one of the nice things I like about PLG is like, when you spend years like Dino and Snyk did and getting this PLG motion right, getting folks to know about it and download it, some level of virality, the handoffs to the sales reps. Like 10 engineers don't quit Google and just copy that. That is years of domain expertise that's a sustainable moat. And let's just make sure we appreciate that. All right, let's get back to Dino.
If you have sales reps and leaders that don't embrace PLG, in the founder's defense, like it won't work. Like if you said that, like what is the one thing that you have to ensure as a founder you have, it's a leader who's at least curious enough to get as knowledgeable as he or she can around product-led growth, what it means, what are the levers. Because if you have somebody that's sort of a stubborn top-down thinker, they'll never be able to unlock all the potential possibilities, because for each company, it's going to be a bit different.
That's a death trap for many PLG companies. We've both seen it where whether it's the board or the CEO or the founders, like sales is sales, but folks who've been there like yourself recognize that there's a pretty stark difference between the playbook. Can you help us understand that playbook?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I think you got to hire people that know or want to know about it. Secondly, instrumentation matters, and all of us are data junkies, but strive for perfection and gleaning as much useful data as you can to make good decisioning. And know that in an ideal world, these two things make the company stronger. But there is, to your point, at a playbook level, it's got to be taught to the organization. Like our our founder and CEO will, on a quarterly basis, we talk just about sort of the evolution of our PLG motion, what we're seeing, trends. So it's this constant education. And then the playbooks that sort of ride off that get pretty interesting and specific on account-based marketing, because you think ABM, very top down, but if you have enriched PLG data for your SDR team, like now you can curate a much better experience for the customer where they're not just getting bombarded with inbound email. You have context of maybe what they're using in the product, or just by nature of the fact that we know there's some freemium users in the organization and we want to have, a collaborative discussion around some group sessions that we run. We run these stranger danger sessions, capture the flag. So you're able to curate an experience for the customer that isn't just like, let me give you a demo and try to sell you the product, because you have this sort of bottom-up telemetry. So it makes everybody better if you use it.
People who study these, I think, definitely see that moment that you're talking about, where it's like, if I can generalize, the R&D organization gets this PLG funnel to like whatever, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 weekly active users. So there's this thing in there. And it's like, It's like ice cream sundae day for like the first rep that gets to go in there. It's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yep.
And you see different things. Like back in the day, they used to like wait like a week for the user to like adopt and like the product. And all of a sudden it gets to a point where it's like the minute someone hits like download, they get a phone call. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Is that one of the potholes? Is that bad? Do you need to avoid that? And how do you prevent a rep from doing that?
Usually what you're describing comes because there's scarcity of pipeline. Demand isn't as amplified as it was in sort of the COVID 2020-21 digital transformation sort of 2-year hype cycle. But we've been, to your point, very aware of not bombarding customers, at least try to make sure that experience is positive and finding different routes in.
When do you start building that? It's like, I imagine, again, the first couple came in, they were just, this is amazing. I can't keep up with the number of people who are downloading and actively using our product. And at some point you hit a point where it's like that those downloads don't keep up with how fast you're growing the sales org. Did you like do that from day one? Did you have that first 3 reps? Hey, don't get addicted to this stuff. Make sure like 20% of your time you're like cold calling, or did you like have a different team doing that? Like, when did you roll that out, that capability?
We're like everyone else. We're not perfect. We've gone through our fits and starts on it. So it was very, very much inbound PLG focused to start. And it was probably early 21 where we really started to make an investment in a more traditional outbound motion. And it was a partnered team, meaning the SDRs are part of sales and they work within what we call our sales pods. But they were doing a majority of the outbound work with our channel being a small but important part of the demand funnel, and still this PLG piece being a big part of it. And so what we've done since is we've tried to get some of our, what we'll call corporate, we call them velocity and growth reps to carry a bit more of the weight of the outbound prospecting. So there's been some change in approach there. Hence what I say we've been adjusting it as we go forward, but we did have a pretty functionally aligned structure where it was, the SDR sort of owned that outbound motion. We had the PLG/inbound motion sort of supplementing it, where they were triaging it. They were typically higher quality ops, and then getting it into the hands of the sales maker and the SE to sort of, do further qualification, in many cases, pilot through to purchase. We started with very much an inbound centric sales organization, as many PLG companies do, and have since sort of evolved it to this balance, for lack of a better term.
Thank you for being humble that like, hey, we don't all get these things perfectly. Like it never happens. Like, what's your advice then going forward? Like, let's say you join the board of some really hot up and coming PLG company. They're at like, 5-10 million in revenue. They're definitely not at this point yet. They've got like 7 reps. There's plenty of free users. And like, Dino, should we test another channel like outbound, and how?
I think outside of the standard pod structuring and sort of building an efficient sales team, where to your point, you got 3 or 4 sellers, you've got too much demand, keep sort of filling that in so that you're not missing demand, because I know that happens to some organizations. But if you can hive off 5-10% of your capacity to say, look, there are some logical structures we should look at in go-to-market approach, and the concept of an outbound motion is very common. Like, why wouldn't we take one of our markets and start experimenting and see what the difference is, both from the rep productivity, the customer interaction, what does our conversion look like? Because you don't want to be faced with a flatline PLG pipeline. You've got a bunch of reps who are now starving out, and you have no understanding of what it means to augment. So I definitely would encourage people to think openly about, one or two other routes to market always. And even Snyk now, we're looking at multiple routes as we scale beyond, 200 million, hopefully to 300-400 plus.
Hey folks, it's just Mark here. This is a tough one that Dino's going through. It's like, yeah, eventually we're going to hit that frontier where the demand from PLG doesn't keep up with how fast we're trying to grow revenue and how fast we're growing the sales team. So like, how do we integrate in this cold calling team? Like when and how? I mean, he's nailed it with the experimentation. Like we got to be in go-to-market experimenters, just like product. And the question is, when do you run that experiment? I have no doubts that your first foray into outbound is an experiment. And the question is, when is it? The mistake most people make is like, okay, we're doing our next year planning, and it's like, our board wants us to get to 60 million, but our PLG funnel only gets us to 45 million. And then they're like, all right, let's just start cold calling and we'll get another 15. Nope, that's bad. By the time you're signing up to 15 million contribution from cold calling, you better have run that cold calling experiment for at least 2 quarters and figured it out. So that's really the only question in my mind is, look at all your potential budget, and do you have budget to run a cold calling experiment, which is probably 2 SDRs and a rep? Do you have budget to pull them out? That's the time when you should do it. And if you're first on the sales team and like you have budget, do it, because you're going to need it. And if you haven't run the experiment when you need it, you're kind of cooked. All right, let's get back to Dino. And then once we get past a lead to the opportunity stage, is that different in PLG? Like opportunity stage in sales led, a lot of documentation, do great discovery, do great disqualification, qualification, the best reps qualify out, tailor your demo. And I feel like some newbies to PLG are like, oh, that's all gone. Like people already know your product, just show them the pricing page and they buy. Like, is the opportunity stage different?
We have found not really. So we start to measure it once it's fully qualified, a fully qualified opportunity as the same. So it's a funnel, right? So you get it to a certain stage, but many demand funnels, and even my experience at Mimecast, they did a really good job at attributing channel MSP-led opportunities that were truly sourced. And it was very, very simple definition, no opportunity in our CRM at the time that would count as a sourced op. You had your MQL-based opportunities that were attributed to some of the marketing campaigns we were driving, and then full-blown sales, outbound generated ops. But eventually, when they got to the qualified op level, you would still track the close rates on each, and it's the same at Snyk, like which source type opportunity closes at a higher rate. But the journey for the customer has been pretty similar, rightly or wrongly, in both of my experiences. And part of it is, in both cases, you're usually dealing with more than one technical buyer, and by proxy, they haven't tested the product, they haven't seen it, and you're almost letting them play catch up to maybe the PLG source of the opportunity, if it is a true PLG qualified op that brought you to that stage. And so you might have the sales maker, if they're good, which hopefully they are, is like signaling in the buying process that, hey, look, Mark had been one of the people that brought us here. He used our product, in a freemium capacity, but you've got 10 other people on a call where your rep at SC are having to do the same level of discovery, qualification, demonstration of value, and then through to closure.
Yeah, big pothole alert here. People think that the sales motion is different. They think it's like, yeah, I mean, all the stuff I learned in like spin selling and Sandler and like discovery, qualification, needs identification, I don't need to do that. They already know what the product is. They've already educated themselves. As Dino's pointing out, it's not the case. They didn't find that, and I've never seen it. I think like we overestimate how much the end user knows about our product. They stumbled across enough of it to get like one of their point use cases to go, but they don't understand the full premise. And more importantly, the end user and the buyer are often different, right? And so once we get to that opportunity stage, the sales process looks very similar. Pete Caputa, one of our early sales leaders at HubSpot, slow things down to speed them up. And that's what we have here is we can't just assume that they're all the way at the finish line like we'd see in a sales-led growth just because they've adopted the product. And we have to model very similar sales methodologies as we see in that traditional environment. All right, let's get back to Dino.
So we have not found that buying process once you hit that stage to be markedly different.
And so as you think about org structure, does that mean like, we've got obviously demand gen come from different places. We may have an SDR team that is focused on cold calling and an SDR team that's focused on setting appointments with the product qualified leads, like the users. But does that mean that once we've set an appointment, that an appointment from a cold call versus an appointment from a user from the PLG funnel, that acts the same? So we shouldn't specialize the account executive. We should kind of just send appointments to them. Someone from a cold, someone from
We've tried both.
Okay, and which does
we've
better?
We've tried both, and I'd say that we don't have a great answer as to which because there's so many other factors. Like if you think about when I joined in sort of the mid 2021 timeframe to today, the economy has changed. How we focus on our segments has changed. But we did, for our SMB and mid-market business, we did have sort of the concept of inbound and outbound reps. So exactly as you're describing. And part of it was born out of this experimentation of like, hey, we can't just be inbound focused. We need to have this outbound muscle. Part of it was born out of the sales capacity. How quickly could we get it to ramp? So I'd say that we did it for maybe different reasons than it being a completely bespoke or different buying process for an inbound versus outbound lead, or a PQL versus an outbound lead. Yeah, I think it's something, we have really good data. Actually, something we should probably look at to see, was there a market difference between both? But our motive for doing it was maybe different than the journey is completely different for these inbound PQLs versus outbound leads.
How about the rep themselves? When you think about like Mimecast and other sales-led growth, do you have a different hiring profile? Are you trying to find people who have a PLG experience? Does that matter? Is there isolate the differences in product, right? Obviously Snyk's pretty technical buyer. I get that. But if you have apples to apples for everything else, like price, target customer, the buyer type, one's sales-led, one's PLG. Does that change who you're trying to hire?
I think only if curiosity and a desire to understand PLG is not there. So if there's a sales rep, even in enterprise that doesn't have some like interest and curiosity, and in the interview process with our leadership isn't saying like, hey, I don't know anything about this, but I think it could unlock my business. Like if I hear those signals from somebody that I otherwise think is super competent, is a hardworking, caring, aggressive person that's going to really help drive our business and success for our customers, and they don't know about it, but they want to know about it, to me, that's all right. I think you have somebody that truly has this one playbook mentality, which you see from time to time, although admittedly, it's usually more on the enterprise seller side, where you've got people that are somewhat stubborn in how they want to attack things because they've had success. Then, that might be a reason to look elsewhere in a company that really values that PLG motion. I find with SMB sellers, so many of them come from either our SDR team or the local community. PLG is becoming more and more top of mind. Most of them have like at least a 101 level understanding of it, and really are just sponges to want to get educated more on how it becomes a lever for their business. And most of them also still, although we none of us love it, they still sort of enjoy the celebration of sort of that, taking an outbound prospect to a qualified meeting.
Hey folks, Mark here. Yeah, I'm also feeling Dino's pain here on like, do we specialize because of that? Do we specialize the salesperson on outbound and have a different salesperson on leads that are coming from PLG? And it's a tough one, but I'm seeing a pattern here. And this is the pattern that I'm seeing, is in the beginning, you do specialize. The reason why you do it is, I'm an account executive. I got one appointment from PLG where there's 5 users and I'm talking to the decision maker and we already have 5 people at the company using our product. I get another appointment that's a cold call from an SDR. The first appointment is way easier. It just is. And so I'm kind of going to blow off the cold call appointment. And that way we're never going to figure out cold calling. So reps will always find the least path of resistance to get to their goal. And if we're giving them both inbound or PQL, product qualified lead generate appointments, and cold, they're never going to figure out the cold. So to figure out this channel, we have to specialize the outbound salespeople in addition to the SDRs. However, as we progress, and I think this is where Dino's confusion came about, as the brand develops, that difference between the cold appointment and the PLG appointment, it becomes similar because everyone's heard of Snyk. And even the cold appointment, they go, oh, yeah, we've tried you, yeah, that kind of stuff. So as you grow, the complexities of that specialization are no longer justified. And that account executive team can work any appointments. That's the pattern I'm seeing. I hope that you see it in your org too. Let's get back to Dino.
Part of the pivot to why we moved from this inbound, outbound SMB growth motion to now having just a more traditional SMB rep on the hunter side, so really trying to get us into new accounts because they still do some of their old cold calling, and the ones that have been successful were able to sort of do both, frankly. But those are some things we look for.
I do want to finish up, Dino, with if I can fairly look at the evolution of a PLG company through 3 acts of acquiring customers, where act 1 is typically that like humanless, like we talked about, like you get 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 weekly active users. Your product engineering team gets fancy about these like $5 to $10 a month tripwires, and suddenly there's some revenue coming in. And then the thing that you've done so nicely to unpack was like, okay, we can actually do way more by introducing a sales team. And typically that is like an inside sales team. We're paying them whatever, $120,000, $180,000, $200,000 a year. They're bringing in like whatever, $600,000, $800,000 of ARR. Their customers are kind of mid-market customers, like you talking about, like 20, 30, 40K. That's act 2.
Yep.
And that drives us a lot. And then there's this act 3, which is like, wow, our brand is big enough. Our product is stable enough. We've had enough funding that we can do things like SOX compliance and geo-redundancy and all this stuff. We can sell $1 million deals to Fortune 100. But we can't do it through these act 1 and act 2. We have to do a third act. And that's something you've had a big part in. And we see in almost all the big unicorns that have gone to 5 tens of billions of dollars in market cap, they've introduced this third act. So can you tell us about that and what's different about that third act?
Yeah, that was being, again, experimented, incubated. You can see there's a theme here on how Snyk thinks of things, not just in go-to-market, but across the company when I started. But it was one of the things when I got here, like we believed, and I think we were right, that if you can get the Fortune 100 banks, specifically when you're talking, and this is where it's very much dependent on what you are selling. So in our case, developer security technology. So developers are the users, AppSec, ultimately the CISO is the buyer. If you can get CISOs and banks to validate that you have made a market difference in their security posture, and the developers hate you less or love you, as we like to joke, you're gonna have lightning in a bottle as it relates to enterprise relevance. And so the thinking was, let's go and try to capture a few banks where we think there's enough willingness to engage with us, because if you can get a Morgan Stanley, a Citi, a Barclays to become a customer, it validates that, to your point, your security ready, not only your internal controls, like you nailed it, SOC 2 Type 2, even as you think about FedRAMP, all these things help to amplify your brand as an organization that gets risk and security. But it also then just opens up the rest of your TAM that in the case of Snyk, we hadn't really exploited.
Hey folks, Mark here. This Act 3 is so critical. I mean, 7 years in, oftentimes you talk to these PLG unicorns, they're like, yeah, our enterprise business is like most of our business. It's growing faster than everything else. It's just an important act to get right. And Dino, fortunately, has a lot of experience in hiring these enterprise reps. I do find them to be quite different. When I ask people like Dino, those are the two things that are different than a mid-market rep is, one, understanding the political dynamics of an organization. That's usually not necessary for a mid-market salesperson because there's not as many decision makers or influencers. And related to that, how they develop champions, how they truly develop champions. Great enterprise salespeople will say, the number one driver on whether I get a deal is not my product, not my technology, not my references, not my company brand. It's the strength of my champion. Is my champion stronger than the competition's? If you look at like, lots of people use BANT as a qualifying matrix in the mid-market, budget, authority, need, timing. They evolved to MEDIC in the enterprise. Metrics, economic buyer, decision maker, decision process, identify pain, and champion. It's in there. And some people put a second C in, medic with 2 Cs, and it's the competitor's champion. That's why it's so important. And a big difference between those big strategic account sellers in the mid-market is their ability to develop that champion. All right, let's get back to Dino.
There's sort of 2 ways that the CRO, CEO, and founder should talk about it. Do we shoot for the moon, or do we sort of take a stair-step approach? Admittedly, at Mimecast, we were much more iterative as we moved into the enterprise. Whereas Snyk, I think we had the luxury of building a modern platform that could scale. We had enough of the certifications where we shot for the moon on that segment, especially in banking, and had some good initial success. And now, have dozens of 7-figure customers, giving us that sort of brand, I'll call it brand in the enterprise that maybe we didn't have a few years ago.
Dino, because you have so much experience here, you kind of brushed over like all these unique aspects of what an enterprise rep needs to do to close $1 million deal, because you have so much experience in it. But can you just give us like your top 2, like picture that mid-market rep that you see the potential, like you can become $1 million closer. What are like the top 2 or 3 skills that you have to teach them that they didn't develop in the mid-market?
Yeah, I think there's a healthy level of paranoia that your good enterprise reps have. We have been fortunate with the technology we have, the brand we have, but there's still lots of people that we have to market to in these large enterprises that are skeptics. So you need somebody that's paranoid, but humble enough to know how to build sort of bridges with some of the skeptics, in certain sales models, you call them enemies versus champions. I think you need somebody that's got a bit of a vision, like a founder does, as to how you take this initial opportunity and how do you walk it through? What are all the various stakeholders? In some cases, you're figuring out as you go. But as we understood sort of the playbook of where our champions and our detractors might be in a particular opportunity, the good sellers knew how to navigate that. And they still, they knew how to build relationships and get on speed dial with these, both the technical and business executives that they were dealing with. Like at the end of the day, the deals that close like that, you need to have several people that will sort of take your call throughout the entire buy cycle. And as I mentioned, you need that an organization, legal, commercial finance, everybody that'll make the negotiation of those deals as painless as they can be, and they're never easy. And a rep who's sort of seen that and doesn't get panicked when you throw out an $8 million number, TCV number in front of the customer, they throw up all over it, knowing that, all right, we're probably going to land at 4, doesn't mean that the deal's over. And I think that's something just that comes with mileage. Like a lot of the mid-market reps that work for us today will be CROs in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Some of this is just, at bats. And so having that enterprise seller that doesn't get frazzled by it, rattled by, some pretty tough objectives, I think has been, a big part of our success.
Well, thank you for all of this. PLG has been around for some time. I'm of the opinion that we're still in the early innings, and that the disruptive potential of this really exciting go-to-market model and broader business model, we have a lot ahead of us. You and I have both realized that we can't think of a unicorn that didn't run the playbook that you so nicely outlined for us of layering on go-to-market and not ruining the magic that got us to where we are today. So thank you for helping us understand that. Congrats on your journey. And we appreciate you dropping knowledge with us today.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share. I'd always have to do it, but thanks, Mark, for having me.
Today's episode was written and produced by Matthew Brown. Our show is edited by Pizza Shark Productions. Big thanks to HubSpot for Startups and to the HubSpot Podcast Network for keeping the audio on. Hey, also, we're a new show, so if you like what you hear, or if you hate what you hear, leave us a rating and review over on your favorite podcast player. I love the feedback. Also, check out Stage 2 Capital. We're the first VC firm run and backed by over 500 CROs, CMOs, CCOs. So if you're an entrepreneur looking to scale your business, check out stage2.capital. All right, that's it for today. I'm Mark Roberge. See you next week.